It's time to down tools for a bit. Welcome to the Toolshed, the influential podcast for anyone and everyone involved in the building industry. Here's your host, Mick Hawes.
Hey folks, welcome to the Toolshed podcast. As always, we're always looking for philosophies, platforms, software, tools, anything that can help builders or people in the trades have a better business, have a better experience. In this particular episode, I'm talking to Aaron Huey. It's actually Aaron WD Huey. We're going to find out what the WD is. I'm going to go with a William for the W. I'm not sure what the D is, but we're going to find out. And Aaron has a website called hustletalkcoaching.com, where we'll make sure we put the link in the description. And he plays in the space of mental health, personal growth, personal development, which is always a really good topic of conversation because we just can't get enough of it. In fact, we just got off, before we recorded this, a session that we hold with our black belt members every Monday. And part of the topic of conversation is who is the most important person or human that contributes to the success or otherwise of a business. Is it the business owner? Is it the team? Or is it the customer? And in my world, it's the business owner. And part of the conversation was we tend to look after our team and we tend to look after our customers before ourselves. And that's kind of a race to the bottom. You're not going to get great results if you're not looking after yourself. I remember Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He said, if you're on a plane, who would you have preferred to have had most of the training, the cabin crew or the pilot? And I think that the answer is self-evident. But let's welcome Aaron to the show. Aaron, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Toolshed. Tell us where you are to begin with. What part of the world do we find you?
Yep. Thank you very much for having me. In Sydney. The voice doesn't sound like I'm from Sydney. Originally from the UK, back in Scotland. But I've been in Sydney for, it'll be 14 years in November.
Cool. So yes, it doesn't sound like you've got the Sydney accent happening. It sounds like it's from further abroad. Give us a bit of the backstory as to how you ended up, because I know I speak to a lot of people on the podcast, and I'm just fascinated as to how people end up where they end up and what transpired through your journey to sort of point you in the direction of where you are now.
Yeah, it's always, everyone has a story for good or bad, but it shapes us. Background is I'm a carpenter by trade. I left school at 16 because I didn't want to do anything else. Being a carpenter back home, then when I moved to Australia, I tried something different. Didn't know what. I didn't have any, I'm a one-finger wizard, as we saw this morning trying to set this up. So I couldn't really do too much in an office. So I stuck with the tools, but then I worked my way up to site foreman, site manager for a company here in Sydney. Worked for a few companies. And then 2000 and I think it was 15 or 16, I lost a really close friend back home. A pretty kind of traumatic incident with him, and it kind of was my first venture into grieving, kind of mental health. And then it happened again here 2 years later. I lost another friend, and it made me kind of look at life completely different. Both of these guys had young families like me. You know, they were just going about their daily business, doing what you do. And when that happened to them, it shook me. So the second time really challenged my mental health, let's say. So by this time I was a father of 2 kids, working as a site manager, husband at the time. So all the stresses and struggles just got on top of me, and my mental health went to the pan, for want of a better word. And what I found was I did what most men do, put it off for as long as possible before you go and see somebody, the doctor, and get a mental health plan. Got some medication to help with the depression and the kind of anger and all of the stuff that I had going on for me. But what I actually found was personal development helped me a lot more than what the counselling did. and it kind of helped me reframe the way I was looking at things. And then 2000, just before COVID, I got asked to be a coach for the coaching company that I had been going to myself. So I worked with them for about a year on and off while still being a site foreman. But then I realized I was learning a lot of things as not only a coach to others, but my own coaches to help with my, reframe my thoughts, help me manage my anxiety, my just the dark negative thoughts that most of us have, on a daily grind. I was learning things that no one had ever spoke about on site as an apprentice or as a tradesman. So I then kind of refocused all of my coaching and my efforts back to help men with their mental health and learn a little bit more about themselves through personal development. I focused all back on trades because when I looked at it, there was nobody there to help our lads. There's plenty of, let's say, HR fluffy courses that people do, and they point to the Lifeline number and the Beyond Blue, like call these guys, talk to these guys, which they all have their place. However, realistically, none of our lads on site are really going to call any of them until it's too late.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm a big proponent of prevention is better than the cure. I think that's kind of what you're talking about. And I've had plenty of experiences, been involved in all sorts of workshops and group work, and just noticing the difference in how people manage themselves if they've been into some preventative maintenance, really standing guard at the entrance of their mind, versus the majority of people, I guess, that just, take on all of the negativity, all of the pessimism, all of the blame. It's everybody else's fault and that sort of stuff. And the difference in how their lives turned out is significant. But I believe everyone has the opportunity to get on a preventative pathway. And you mentioned you were learning a lot of things that they didn't teach on site when you're a carpenter or a tradesman or what have you. Take us back to that time and help us to understand what were some of the initial things that you started to learn that really captured your attention, and you went, wow, that makes sense. And it became valuable. And I want to start back then because, I think we sometimes forget how far we come when we start to get on a personal development journey and we learn things, we learn more and we become, I guess more knowledgeable about things. And we think up here is the normal. But we've got to remember where we started. And a lot of people listening, this would make a lot more sense to them. So what were some of those things that you became aware of on site?
Yeah, so a lot of the things that the coaching taught me, and it was to look further than the end of the week. Most tradies will go Friday to Friday because that's when they get paid, and they don't have any further aspirations or any dreams, probably because they've never been told or been allowed to think that far. That was one of them, like not looking towards, that I can't wait till Friday, because you're wishing the week away. When I had an overall kind of step back plan of what I was wanting to achieve and how I was going to get there, at the time I was in the job that I loved, but I didn't really like. I enjoy being a site manager. However, I wanted more. I just didn't know what at the time. But when I was taking, the small view of what I was doing is just a step to the next one and the step to the next one. It kind of made those kind of tough days feel a little bit more manageable. They didn't feel as bad. But then also the reframe, like you said there, of taking ownership. So many people blame everything else around about them, but they won't change anything. And that was one thing that I took on. I was like, okay, if I'm going to make this coaching happen, if I'm going to, become the face of improved men's mental health in construction, I have to start with myself. And most guys who are site managers will know, you wake up 3-4 o'clock in the morning worrying about the things that are happening for the day ahead. So I was doing this, and what I was finding was I didn't know it at the time, but I was having huge panic attacks on the way to work, like stressing out before I got to work, then getting to work and not really being able to focus properly. When I started reframing how I was looking at things, and then I found a thing called breath work, a box breathing technique where you just kind of breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold the breath out for 4 seconds. And you do this 5 or 6 times, it just slows everything down, and you're able to regulate your thoughts a little bit better. You know, your mind isn't racing. You've got more clarity on what you're doing. You're not catastrophizing everything. You know, as a site manager, you wake up thinking, you know, did I order enough concrete? You know, have we signed off these permits? You know, is this trade going to turn up? Are we going to be? You know, all of these thoughts that were racing through my mind throughout the night and throughout the day, I was able to do this technique in the truck on the way to work. So by the time I'd get to site, I would be regulated. You know, the heart wouldn't be racing, the mind wouldn't be racing. I was clear in what I was going to do for the day. And the more and more I did this, I was able to tackle situations at work when things happened, and, you know, not be the guy who was running around like a headless chicken. Being able to, like, say, okay, you know, you clean this up, you do this, you do this. I was able to manage it. But then I took that home as well. So at this point I had like 2 young kids. And if anyone has kids and you know what it's like, you get home from work, you get handed the kids, or the kids are going crazy. It's almost like you go from one crazy construction site where everyone's running around to you go home, it's the exact same. So being able to utilize this technique helped my stress and anxiety on both at home and on site. And it made everything feel more manageable. It didn't feel like everything was running away from me. And at this point, I had never heard anybody talk about this stuff on site.
My sense with this sort of thing is that it obviously works, and you know I've done the same thing, breath work, been coached through it, and we know it works. But my question is, how did you, I guess, implement it? Because you can get to a certain level of panic or stress or what have you, and you're just not thinking logically at that point. I know what I need to do is some breath work. It's kind of the last thing you think of. You're in that red zone, and you know, you just kind of stay there. So did you take a bit of a preventative approach to that and start to do the breath work before you started to think that the negative thoughts, or started to get a little bit into that red zone? How did you do it? Because the implementation of it is the key, just not knowing about it.
Yeah, well, it's exactly that. It's the repetition. So at one point, I used to do this like almost 3 times a day. So I'd do it on the way to work in the truck, so that I was good when I got there, and then I would go off at some point throughout the day. So whether it would be into the toilet or the office when no one was there, and I would do it as kind of like almost like a top up of relaxation, if you'd like. But then I would do it, and I actually preach this to my trades now with a slightly different name to it, let's say. But I would do it before I would go home or before I would pick up the kids. I would have half an hour, 10, 15 minutes in the truck before I'd go home to just kind of reground, let everything that happened throughout the day go, and then head in the door and kind of start afresh, rather than taking the stress of work straight home. So I used to do this 3 times a day to kind of preempt what was coming. And you're right. It's all about implementation. It's like knowing that this works for you and actually utilizing it are 2 different things. So I decided I'll keep this as like a daily routine type thing. And yeah, I felt a lot better. Like even just in traffic, like I wasn't that kind of angry tradie shouting and swearing at people in the traffic, but I used to be. I need to get to such and such. You're in my way. When I kind of stepped back from it all and was like, we had the realization that everyone's going about their own day. Everyone has their own stresses. Everyone has their own struggles. And once you've got that kind of clear of head, and you kind of have that in the back of your mind as well, you're quicker to respond than react, and you don't actually get yourself all kind of worked up and then fall back into that kind of not rage mentality, but that you're building on your own anger.
Yeah. A little bit ago, you were talking about setting the goal to get into coaching, and setting a goal. I need to do this if I'm going to make it work. I've got to get off my date and make it happen. But you talked about goal setting, and I want your thoughts on that. I find that, like, I'm a big believer in goal setting. The big challenge that I've found over sort of 30 odd years of doing this performance coaching stuff is getting people, unless they're in a room, like in a workshop sort of area, you can get them to write stuff down. But when they're left to their own devices and you talk about goal setting, they kind of go, yeah, I've got this goal. And it stays this mental picture, probably a very unclear mental picture. They don't kind of necessarily think about the actions I need to take to get there. It's just, it's a want, but without any pathway, direction or actions. What are your thoughts about that, and how did that work for you? Because it sounded like you definitely had some clarity as to what you wanted to do. Hey, I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt, and I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Toolshed podcast. I've got something super exciting I want to share with you. We've got a place that's got a whole bunch more free resources to help you with your building business. In fact, there's a whole other podcast that gives you specific training that will help you get more free time, more profit, and more enjoyment from your building business. And it's called, funnily enough, the Toolshed. It's free to join, and it's full of other success-focused builders. And I invite you to join us in the Toolshed, where you can ask me questions and get guidance and support from other successful builders. Just click the link in the description to join, and I'll see you in there. I hope you enjoy the rest of this podcast.
Yeah, well, I think it all comes down to, in the end, it comes down to accountability, having somebody to hold you accountable. Like, everyone has these great grandiose ideas of, going to the gym at the start of January, or, having this big house or having a boat or whatever it is. They're all kind of only dreams unless you have someone who holds you accountable and keeps you on track. One thing that the coaching company that I work for, we have it's like a 7-year plan. And you write it out on this. It's on the wall across the way there, and you write out all areas of life that you want, what you want, whether they're you're going to achieve them, or whether they're outreachable. You write them down, and you put them up on the wall so you can physically see them every single day. They're not just in a book somewhere, and that kind of is a bit of a reminder, is a bit of an accountability tool. Every time you have a bad day, or you don't want to go to the gym, or you don't want to work on whatever it is you're working on, you have something visually in front of you. It holds you accountable. But there's nothing better than actually getting on a call with someone, or even having someone in your household to hold you accountable. And you said you would do this. I have my 3 kids, and I tell them I'm going to do something. They're like little mini coaches. They're like, Dad, remember you said you were going to do this? Have you done this yet? And I jokingly tell my clients that, like, if you've got a 4 or 5-year-old in your house, tell them you're going to do something, and see how long they'll let you get away with not doing it. So, yeah, for me, accountability is key. I've got a bit of a 4 pillars of change that I've put together over the past couple of years. And first one is awareness. You need to be aware of something that isn't working for you, or something that you want to change, and then you need to take ownership of it. Because, like you said, nothing's going to change unless you make it change. And then you get the education of how you're going to change, how you're going to improve, how you're going to make your life better or reach that goal. And then the last one is ultimately accountability. You have to have someone to hold you to the fire, because the mind, when it's in that, like you say, the bubble of a workshop or a retreat or somewhere, you're full of good intentions. But when you go back to life and your family, business, the world around about you, it starts kicking you in the arse. That's when you start to slip. And a lot of people just lose their motivation to achieve those goals. Yeah. But if you have somebody there who's going to, hold you to it, I think that's the ultimate way to achieve things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's something that we've discovered in our journey is there's like the self-accountability, which is probably the worst accountability. And then there's, coach Absolutely. Accountability, being accountable to a coach, which works better than self, but I think the ultimate is peer accountability and belonging to a community, and like you're saying, instead of telling the 4 or 5-year-old, tell people in your community what you're going to do, and by saying it out loud, it really, you tend to hold your own feet to the fire because you've mentioned it out loud. The other thing you talked about was the coaching company that you work for. So the website we're looking at is hustletalkcoaching.com. .com. Is that your coaching business? Are you part of a coaching group? How does Hustle Talk
Yeah.
coaching work? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Hustle Talk Coaching is my own coaching company, my own business, and the name Hustle Talk comes from I used to have a podcast, and it was called Hustle Talk, and it was very similar to this. It was interviewing people who have changed their lives, or were changing other people's lives. So it was coaches, consultants, business people, entrepreneurs, and I throughout that journey and going through the podcast, that hustle came with a different meaning. It wasn't just work, 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 work. It was, if you want to improve anything in your life, whether it's achieve the goals. Ultimately, for me, it's called hustle to happiness. Most people aren't happy throughout their daily life. 75% of our thoughts are negative. So you have to work on being happy, being successful, seeing the greatness out there. And that's where the hustle comes from. So when I was starting my coaching company, Hustle Talk kind of just felt right for a coaching company. It's not too trade related, so I am changing it up. I have a wellness consultant company that I'm starting for construction companies, for construction consulting from a wellness and with all the psychosocial stuff that's going on right now. There's a lot of companies that don't really know the ins and outs of it. So I'm retraining to look at that. But the Hustle Talk coaching is my one-on-one, my one-to-one, or my kind of group coaching area for guys and girls within the construction industry.
So somebody's listening to this and going, I could use some support and some help. What's the pathway to you, and what are the steps? What can they expect? What will they experience?
Yeah, so initially jumping on a call together or meeting up. I have one client who prefers to meet in face to face. So initially getting on the call together, find out, where are you, where would you like to be, and how I can help ultimately in between. And that can be everything from, where you are with your mental health, where you are with your relationships to yourself, to those around you. When it comes to our men, my main concern and my main effort is to kind of help them unlearn the things that they've been taught, the kind of she'll be right mentality, just covering everything up, and then relearn that it's okay to ask for help, because we're losing far too many of our men within the industry just because they won't talk about anything, they won't open up. And so trying to go on a journey together, whether it be a couple of sessions, whether it be part of the 12-week program, where we look at all aspects of your life, not just you, but your family, your relationship, where you want to be when it comes to your career, and then just working alongside you to get to those end goals. But then on the other side as well, I do company presentations. So there's my big push right now is to try and get out on the site floor and do wellness presentations, mental health presentations to the guys who are kind of sole traders, the small to medium businesses who don't benefit from the bigger EAPs or employee wellness programs, because ultimately it's the guys who were like me way back when, or the boots on the ground, who probably need the help more than anyone, but they don't know where to turn to. So the wellness presentations are to engage a little bit, tell my story, so they can also resonate with me. I'm not just a generic mental health worker who's done a course. I've actually been there, seen there, and done it. But to let them know that there's somebody else out there who's within their industry, it's a lot of messages come across, and I've seen it in previous HR talks where the guys just switch off because they don't resonate with the person speaking. However, majority of the talks I have done on sites, all the lads are engaged, and I've actually been quite intrigued. It's a lot of the older lads who have come up to me at the end of it and shaken my hand and said, we need more of this on site. So it's kind of that message from the lads on site that this is needed, that keeps me going and keeps me pushing through to do this message and this work.
We've got a bit of a tradition on the podcast. When I say we've got a tradition, I think this is the third episode that I've asked the question out of, I don't know.
It's a starting tradition.
80 episodes of this particular podcast we've started a new tradition. And the tradition is just simply asking you, to the listener, which is, people generally in the residential construction industry, what is your best bit of advice for them? Particularly being a coach, particularly working in that mental health, the wellness area. If you could just tell somebody one thing, and it's your best bit of advice, what would that one thing be?
Yep. It's a tagline on my business cards, and I'll use it here because it's my simple message is a simple conversation can be the start of help. Like our guys have been conditioned not to talk about what's going on for them, for the fear of being judged, for the fear of being weak, for the seeming soft. I'd like to flip that. Once you start opening up and you start healing yourself and working on yourself, it's actually a superpower because those around about you will benefit from it. So yeah, conversation can be the start of help. Talk more.
Yeah, love it. So I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast. I love talking about this stuff. It's super, super important. We need to be talking about it more. The cool thing is there is a lot more conversation about this now. It's not swept under the rug like it was before. There's a lot more openness. There's a long way to go, but there is progress in this space now, which is pretty exciting. And I'm assuming best way to get in contact with you is go to hustletalkcoaching.com. There's a free clarity call button there. Just click that and follow the prompts. Is that the way to go?
There or Instagram, LinkedIn, kind of the majority of socials I'm there because obviously the demographic that we have in the industry, some lads are more online, some of the office guys are on LinkedIn. So yeah, either LinkedIn or Instagram, Aaron WD Huey, coach to the tradies. Yeah, so far, perfect. I'm the only one.
The only Aaron WD Huey. You're the only one.
Yeah, I haven't come across another one, so it's not too hard to find.
And in the introduction, I said I was backing William for the W. Was I close?
Yep, you're spot on.
Oh, there you go. What's the D?
And the D is Daniel.
Okay. Aaron William Daniel Huey. Lots of names.
It's a bit more of a mouthful than Aaron WD.
Excellent. As I said, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the podcast. Love talking about this stuff. Really support you in what you're doing. It's just wonderful that we've got people like yourself out there that give us stuff enough to put their life in a direction that's its purpose is to help others, which is just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So thank you very much for being on the podcast. It's great stuff.
Cheers, Mick. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, there's a few of us out there, and like you said, the message is getting bigger and better. So we're on the right path to helping our guys and girls, thankfully.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go, folks. There's another episode of the Toolshed. If you want to have a chat with Aaron, you can just look him up, as he said, on any of the socials. Aaron WD Huey, Huey, and reach out that way, or you can go to hustletalkcoaching.com, and there's a button there for a free clarity call. We'll make sure we put all of the links to that in the description, so all you need to do is click and go for it. I hope this got you thinking about yourself and how you can help others, but let's start with yourself. Start with some preventative maintenance, such as the box breathing, the 4 in, hold for 4, exhale for 4, keep it out for 4, little things like that. They're little things that can make a big difference, but we've got to be preemptive with them rather than waiting till it's too late. And as Aaron suggested, he was doing it 3 times a day, whether he needed it or not. And I think that's the power in it. Do it rather than waiting until you need it. So it's good advice there. I hope this episode got you thinking. We'll be back with another episode of the Toolshed podcast before you know it. I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. That is all. Bye. I'm out. I forgot what I was going to say. I normally say exactly the same thing at the end of the podcast, but I don't know what happened. My mind went blank, but there you go. It's live. We're not going to edit it out. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Toolshed. If this podcast struck a chord with you, make sure you spread the word by sharing it with your mates in the building industry. We love your help to make the building industry better for everyone involved.